Okay, so let's go how to make your first repository with Git, right? So it's quite simple. What we want to do is I'm going to go to my text editor of choice. It's going to be VS Code. And you want to open the terminal. You can go into your own directory that you want to initialize Git in. And you're going to use the very simple command git init, right? So we see this warning from Git. And basically what this is telling us is that, developers have adapted to different terminology over the years, right? In the past, developers, used to prefer master. And what I mean by using master is when you do a git init, basically a .git folder is made where you have all this different type of stuff. We're going to be going over here, but not for now. And Git makes a default branch, and this is basically what this master is. It's the name of our default branch. It's something we discussed in the previous video. And developers nowadays, as Git mentions themselves, let me bring this back. It says that names commonly chosen instead are main, trunk, and development. You can either make a new branch, or you can set a configuration to Git, configure Git just like this, and replace this with a name of your choice. Like, well, you can set this to master and the server will still go, or you can set it to main. You just need to, have a definition for this, and this error will never show up ever again. And here is the proof for you guys. Right, so a new Git repository was initialized. By the way, the configs for your Git are in your home root and slash dot git config. I believe, yeah, it's git config. If I actually, let me show you guys. Yeah, dot git config. So that's that, and let's initialize our Git repository. We already have done that, and let's go through the cycle of a Git repository, how a Git repository actually works, and the different life cycle of files in there. So the first thing in the first stage in the life cycle is the tracking. Right? Untracked, it means that, hey, we can arbitrarily tell Git, hey, Git, I want you to see so and so files or directories. Right? We have to specify to Git that, hey, I want you to manage these files. So that's untracked. The next step is unmodified. So we haven't made any modifications, and after we modify a file, we go to modified, and after that we go to staging. Right, this graph tells us everything really well. And so let's go back actually. Let's go back to VS Code. And so if you look at the file explorer, you can see next to readme I have a U. I've made this new file, and I've added a readme.md, and basically the U is signifying, hey, this is not tracked by Git. If you want to track it, we can add a git add, and we can either specify the name, or we can do a git add dot, which adds everything in the current directory. But let's say we want to just go by name and add get readme. And you see the color changed, and now it is tracked, right? This is the definition of tracking. When I say tracked, it means it's been added by Git. And so the next step after this is, if I actually break this up, is modification. So we have this introduction to Git, and let's say I added new text here, right? So now we have modified, and you can see a M being added, right? So we went through 3 different cycles. We went through untracked to tracked, unmodified to modified. So how we would add these to Git, how we would tell, hey Git, I want you to, keep these into consideration. keep these changes into consideration, we stage, and this is what staging means. We commit, so we take a snapshot of our code, and let me tell you what this commit is. When we do git commit, let's actually just do that right there. We can add a message for a commit, a very brief summary. So that goes by convention, and I'll mention the convention by the end of the video. We do git, like let's say we add a readme. This is going to be the convention we want to use. And if we actually add this, you see that, hey, this has been added to git. Right? Now, so this has been staged now. And how can we know it's staged is by doing a git log. A git log shows us all the staged files. And, well, it basically tells us the commits that we've appended. Right? Now we can actually do something else as well. We can do a git commit -m and then append this message. So your question might be, why would I ever use git commit when I can just add the message right there? Now, there's a really good use case for that, and let's say here we add a subbranch. What you'll learn in this course, right? If we go back to our terminal, right, and we do a git commit, or well, I have to track these files, and git is telling me you have to track. So git git add dot git commit m, and then we're gonna just do a commit without anything. So we're gonna say update readme, and we're gonna put 2 spaces, and we're gonna tell a description, a brief description. This change will add let's say this change will add a new course workload, or whatever. It doesn't really matter. And if we go back to git log, you'll see that, hey, now we have a good description. This is quite important and useful to use. Now, what we also can do is see the status of the stuff we've changed, right? Let me put these two side by side so it's easier to understand everything. I just wanted to go through the cycles first, and now we want to see how can we see what's been changed through these cycles. And there's a git commit for this, and so let's add a few stuff. You'll be great at git. Okay, so we've added that. So now how can we see the change? We can use a git status. So git status is telling us, hey, you have made a new change. So now you have to git add that commit, you have to add or track the changes. And now that you've tracked the changes, you can do a git commit, and then do a well, let's just do a git add and then see the status. So now it's saying, hey, we have this modified, we've modified readme, and let's say I also changed something else, like let me put something else like you'll be a 10x developer. Let's go back over here. Let's also do status again, and now you see that, hey, we have this tracked modified file and this tracked and unmodified this tracked, untracked, and modified file. That was kind of hard to say. And so you understand what tracking is, and you understand what we're referencing when we say we're tracking a file. Tracking is the concept of tracking the changes to a file. And as soon as we modify, we go back to tracking, or as soon as we stage, we go back to tracking, and we start tracking and committing once more. So now that we see this, we can also do one more thing, and that is using or seeing another change. And we use git difference, right? I want you to understand what I'm saying with git difference. What git difference is basically doing is it is checking the changes that have not yet been tracked with the tracked changes, right? So if I add 2 more files, you will automatically go to Google. Let's go and do a get difference once more, and then you see the change that have not been tracked yet. And again, if we do a get status, get is telling us, hey, you gotta add this change. So now let's do a get status once more, and then we can commit that change and then update readme. Okay, so we can log everything once more. We can log everything we've changed, and we see that, hey, we had this, original change, which added readme. Then we have this updated one, which will add a new course workload, and we have this last one, which also updated readme. Right, so this is Git, basically. Just one more thing, we can also make this Git log a bit more pretty, because this is really, really bad. You can barely understand anything. We can use a one line, and this basically simplifies everything. It's not just telling us these information we really don't care about. It basically tells us the first 7 characters of a hash, and by the way, hashes in Git are unique. They are basically a pointer referencing the different commits to a Git commit, or a reference, and I'll tell you guys what a reference and that kind of stuff is in a second. And we understand which branch, so the head branch we are in. You can also see this in Git status, by the way. So it says on branch main, and we see the commit, not the description again. See, we don't see the description. We've added up there. So great, you basically know the very, very basics that a lot of developers know, but they're really way too simple. You're basically touching the surface of what you can do with Git. So just before we wrap up this video, I want to tell you what the Git folder is in just a second, and we're going to be talking about how to make good commits. So I told you when we make when we do a git init, basically Git makes a new .git file folder, and if we actually go back, let me show you what this folder is all about. If I do a ls of .git, you see these different files that are in our Git folder. Right, so let's go back and let's talk about what these different folders are and files are. So basically, first of all, we have this head. So head is, you remember when I said commit hashes define their pointer to where we are at, and the head is also a pointer. So a head tells Git, where am I? Which commit am I referencing? Which timeline in history am I referencing? So let's say this is a timeline. A head can be here, it can be here. It's pointing here, right? It's pointing here, or it's pointing here. It can point either which. So then we got the references. References are basically the branches, the tags. We will talk about branches and tags. So we also have a ref heads. So heads is basically the local branches. Remotes are the remote branches. I said remote is a website where we host our code and different stuff like that. We talked about what a config is. A config is just Git configs. We changed our own config. What objects are. These are the different versions of code we have in Git. We'll talk about these later. We have hooks, which are automated tasks that we can tell Git to do, and we have exclusions. We'll talk about these later on. We probably won't talk about excludes because I'll talk about this right now, in fact. Basically we can add a new file, touch a gitignore, and this tells Git, hey, just remember, the files I put in here, ignore the changes I make to them, right? So if I change the code over here, we're basically telling, hey, Git, I don't want you to be looking for the changes in here specifically. So that's that. And so the last thing we're going to be talking about is, we'll talk about gitignore in another video, by the way. Last thing I want to talk about is how to make proper commits. So when you want to make a good commit, I want you to ask a very simple question, okay? I want you to ask a very simple question, and you need to give an answer to this question. If it makes sense, then it is good. Okay, and basically, imagine this in your head. When you want to make a commit, ask yourself, this code will, and then fill in the blank. So this code will add readme. Basically, if we go back, if we go back to VS Code, you also see the fact that that's the naming scheme I've also opted to use when referencing this. So if we go back in here and then we do a git log one line, you see that this code will add readme, this code will update readme, this code will update readme. Right, so just go by that. Honestly, it's the most simple and simple explanation I could give to writing great commits. Now, of course, different teams have different schemes, right? So a very popular scheme for me to tell you guys is appending what this is doing. So we could append a feat. So this stands for feature. This is not really important because, again, it depends on your own team. It's a organization toolkit, is basically. So your team can have its own different things. We can have fix, we can have docs, we can have refactor. We can basically have every single one of these and everything else that we want to add ourselves, and it all just works, dude. It just depends on your team and how your team decides to manage and scheme these. So one more thing I just wanted to add to this is, this whole concept of Git adding something and then Git, well, let me, I already modified this. This whole concept of Git adding and then Git committing might get a bit frustrating. So what we can do alternatively is do a Git commit and then append a, which will do basically a Git add dot. So Git commit a is doing the thing above, is doing Git add dot, and we can add a message to this and then add new text. And then see how this also makes sense. And if we go back into git log, hey, we have this add new text. So by the way, in VS Code you can just hold control, press on this, and then we'll see the change